Welcome everyone to this month's webinar, Proposals for Outcome-Based Selling. This is August in 2018. Thank you guys for coming. I've got some great stuff to talk about today. We have a huge turnout. I'm very happy about that. Lots of registrants. For those of you who don't know me, who somehow got roped into this without knowing what it was all about, I'm Tom Stimson. I'm the founder and president of the Stimson Group, management consultant for the AV industry. There's all the places you can find me right there. Trust me, if you don't know who I am now, you will find out soon enough. Before we go any further, I've got to thank some sponsors. These are the Jumpstart Workshop sponsors for 2018, and they've helped make this possible. Their contribution, their funding of these events pays for a lot of very expensive stuff like putting on webinars, putting on workshops, having an awesome assistant, all that kind of good stuff. So AV Franklin, you know them as the people who have been selling you AV Stumpfel screens for 17 years now, and they continue to do that. Please patronize them. My friends at HireTrack, Lasso, and Flex. The great folks at Square AV who have been doing the AV for my workshops and have really taken me to a whole nother level. Thank you guys very much. And then the great folks at Avixa, who is now supporting not only the Jumpstart workshops, but webinars and like this one. So thank you guys very much for all of your support. So why? So why this webinar? Why this webinar today? So an observation I've made many times, maybe not in these exact words, is that we tend to use product proposals to sell services. And we come by it rightly. This was originally a product industry. If you're on the live event side, you started off as a rental company, you were renting products. Sometimes you delivered them, sometimes you set them up before it evolved in something much more service-oriented and a lot less rental-y. Same thing on the integration side. We originally sold boxes, and then people wanted us to install them and put them together, and it got increasingly complicated. But a lot of us never changed the way that we put proposals together because it didn't change the way that we priced things. We were still pricing things the same way. So some of all these products, this many hours of labor, these delivery charges, these expenses, we add that all up together and there's a price. However, that's not how we should be selling today. And that's what, of course, today's webinar is all about. In this product proposal scenario that we've been following for so long, in order to get value add and in order to include things to differentiate yourself, we tend to add them for free. We tend to add things like project management and drawings and site surveys with little or no cost, or maybe just expense recovery. And the reason is we don't have any other way to fit them in because they're not a product. Or they are a product and we have to convey them as that, but the client doesn't want to pay for them because your competitor is not charging for them. So we start throwing in these value adds, which is, of course, simply just means free. And then the other reason is we're leaving a lot of money on the table. So obviously, if we're putting in value adds for free and we're just adding up products to sell service, of course we're leaving stuff on the table. I mean, that's the whole point of this, isn't it? And the fourth thing that I've noticed is that we lose on price all the time. And that makes us focus on price more, which doesn't actually solve the problem, because in order to focus on price, you focus on the products and the adding up the line items, and we're not expressing our value. So you lose on price because your value is not apparent to the buyer. Okay. So my big takeaway for you today, if you sign off right now, just take this with you. Stop selling at face value. Your service is worth more than the sum of all of the parts that you're providing. You are worth more than what's on the paper that you're putting in front of customers in your current proposal format. And even if you've modified your proposals and you started selling a scope of work, I'm going to show you how to recover even more value out of your proposal, out of your relationship with the customer, for things that you are already doing, probably for free. Last month's webinar was about the ideation process, the sales ideation process, which is taking the information that the customer provides us, doing a deeper discovery on it, and coming up with solutions for that particular circumstance, something that uniquely adds value for the customer in customer terms. And we go through this process of ideation, validation, curating the idea so that we can pitch what we want to do for the client to them, get their feedback, develop some ROI with the client before we ever write a proposal. Now, this doesn't apply, obviously, to every single type of project that we will do, but the projects that are most valuable to you, the things that you think are the most important, are exactly the ones you need to use this ideation process with. And the seventh step in the ideation was the proposal, and that's what this webinar today is about. We're going to talk about what does that proposal actually look like. And there are 9 parts to this proposal. Don't be afraid. I've seen your proposal. Some of you have 25 parts in your proposal. There's only 9 parts. There are other things that you can add on. We'll talk about that, but this is the substance of a proposal. And I call this the service proposal template. So we'll go through each one of these 9 sections one at a time, explain to you how they work, how they interact, and I'll give you some examples of how they might apply to your particular business. A big theme in everything that we're going to talk about in this proposal is what versus how. You've heard me say it many times. You want to sell the what, not the how. Sell what you will do, not how you will do it. And if you're following the ideation approach, this will be obvious to you. We need to sell the outcome. If during that process of selling, you find that the customer begins to focus on the how because they've completely bought into the what, that's not an indication that you need to sell how. That's an indication that you need to close the deal. That's a pivot moment for those of you who are in my sales workshop. That's a pivot moment where the client's giving you permission to close the deal. And that's how they're doing it. So more on that later. So sell the end result, not the plan. This is the proposal we're going to do it with. Oh, yeah, one more comment here about pivoting back to the what. So if the client wants to take you off of what before you finish selling what, in other words, they want to go, yeah, that's all good and fine. Tell me how many of these I'm going to have on there. Okay. Find the right words, find the right question, the right way to pivot that back to the correct conversation. Like, would you like to learn more about how we will approach this? And very often they're not. No, I want to learn how I can compare your proposal to somebody else's proposal, in which case you found out that you've actually wandered into our price shopper. You didn't do a good job of qualifying, in which case you may have to take more earnest steps to recapture the moment. But if all they really want to know is they want to understand how it all works, then explain the customer experience, which includes some discovery points about the how. So don't get distracted when the customer starts bringing up how things. Figure out how to get them back into the conversation that talks about the what, talks about the experience, that leads them to the outcomes that they're really interested in. All right, now down to the good stuff. Here's the 9 points. Let's walk through this proposal. The first section of the proposal is called background or situation. It's one or the other. I'll explain that in a minute. The background or situation demonstrates first and foremost that you are taking this request seriously. Okay? It tells the reader, it tells the buyer that you are looking beyond surface issues. In other words, you understand the implications of your role, that you're an important part of all of this. Okay? It's telling the reader that your proposal demands careful consideration. And it's also demonstrating that you're willing to be provocative. You're not taking this at face value. You're getting beneath the surface. You're going to help the customer see some value here. So the background or situation is very important, because if we don't capture the reader's attention, okay, they're not going to invest in everything that you have coming after this. So take some time, make sure you get the background correct. So there's a difference between a background and a situation. A background is what you describe when you're fulfilling a need. Typically, when you're responding to an RFP or doing a job that you've done before, you use background because you're fulfilling a need. Situation is when you're solving a problem. In other words, if you're providing a solution to a problem, which many of us do in AV, we're dealing with very complex issues that people don't know how to solve when they come to us as experts, in which case we might have a situation. The situation is, how do I do projection mapping on this building when I don't have a position to project from? That's a situation. So I'm going to describe the situation then. In the background or the situation, you're going to have to add something that demonstrates what your value is going to be in all of this. You need to tell the reader something they don't already know. A lot of backgrounds are simply telling the readers things they already do know. This company has an event at these dates, at this time, this big of an audience. They don't need to know all that. They already know it. Don't tell them again. Tell them something they don't know. Make a high value contribution. You also, in the background, need to identify the consequences of inferior solutions. If we do the obvious, here are the things that could happen that are at risk. And particularly if it's a situation, remember that the customer always has the option to do nothing. So you can choose to do nothing. You can choose not to do the projection mapping because it's too difficult, it's too expensive, you don't have a good ROI. But if that were true, you probably wouldn't actually be writing a proposal now, would you? So here's an example of a situation or a background. Okay? This one says, first of all, we're going to make a statement of premise. We're going to make a statement of the customer's intent, your high value contribution, and then a consequence or a challenge to the premise that says, here's what happens if you don't go this route. So let me read this for you. ABC Corporation is seeking proposals to update its executive conference room. We all know that. That's all we need to say. The upgrade will address ease of use and reliability issues that exist within the current system. That's what the customer thinks that they're doing. Okay? That's what they've expressed to you. In addition, our analysis of ABC's needs reveals that the current inability to seamlessly integrate remote attendees or allow the display of personal devices is affecting meeting attendance and participation. You've just made a high-value contribution that while they may know that, they didn't introduce it into the needs analysis. And now the critical consequence, research has shown that organizations that stay on top of communications trends perform at a higher level. This project will help ABC be one of those companies. And now this is a very simplified example of this, but it's accomplishing all the things that a situation is supposed to do. It's proving that I'm credible, it's proving that I'm engaged, I'm looking beyond the surface, and I'm setting them up for an outcome-based solution rather than a sum of the parts solution. Now, if you're a little scared right now, that's okay. This is a very different approach to how we do things. Okay? Not everybody wants to get involved in this kind of a proposal because you're worried about what the customer is going to say and what they're going to do. Let me remind you that you probably don't want to win the project by finding the customer's price and feature tolerance for products. I mean, go back to why we're having this webinar in the first place. If you want to get out of that paradigm where all they're doing is skipping over the marketing speak that you have at the beginning of your proposal and getting right into the parts and pieces and what they cost so they can compare you to your competitor, okay? That's not the winning formula. That's not where you want to be unless you're trying to sell on price. So yes, it's okay to be afraid, but there's still compelling reasons to pursue this methodology. So you want to sell the value of your services, not your products. Everybody has products. Anybody can get products. Amazon will sell everything that you have all day long. What do you do with those products that makes a difference? And why you do it is also valuable. So you can add on service or maintenance, design, and other things to make your value more apparent. So the second section of the proposal is goals and objectives. Now, sometimes I will call them goals, project goals. Sometimes I'll call them project objectives. I usually don't call it both. Figure out what's appropriate for your audience. Okay? Goals and objectives, you want to use bullet points. Get away from these long narrative things that are hard, that people have to sit down and read. When people see paragraphs, particularly paragraphs that are more than 3 lines long, they glaze over and they start skipping big chunks of it. Bullet points, we tend to read, and we tend to read all the words in a bullet point. But Succinct bullet points are probably your friend, particularly when you're talking about goals. Whenever possible, use the client's words. Use agreed upon goals. You're not creating new goals for them. These are the goals they told you that you're verifying that you understand what they are. They don't all have to be tangible goals. They can be intangible ones as well. So don't be afraid to say, this is going to improve the overall meeting experience, or people are going to be happier with this setup. If you can quantify or qualify later why that's true, then that's a valid goal, a valid objective. Sometimes I'll break it into two sections. I'll do the obvious things first, and then I'll say something like, our discovery process has identified these additional objectives that the client may not have considered. Okay? That's also a very valuable list. People are going to look at that and go, oh. So the discovery process, or think about ideation, the discovery process is you probably need to interview relevant parties involved in a project. It could be, if you're working on events, it could be past attendees, it could be organizers, it could be sponsors, other participants. If it's a built environment project, talk to users. Don't just talk to the stakeholders, talk to the people who actually use the environment and find out what their objectives are, what their needs are, get the backstory, make yourself more useful. So here's an example of some objectives bullet points. So working off the same conference room, we're going to install a reliable AV system that requires minimal maintenance and training. That's the that's the original premise. The client's expecting that. We're going to improve user satisfaction and acceptance. That's a secondary objective. Okay? It's an implied benefit of the original premise. We're going to eliminate wasted meeting time spent on troubleshooting technology. Now you've introduced another objective on user-cited benefits. Okay? The client probably didn't come to you and say, hey, we're wasting a lot of meeting time troubleshooting technology. They just said, no, we want a working AV system. Get down deeper, get down to the emotional reasons they want to do this project. And then make a third objective, something unexpected, a benefit they haven't talked about or haven't expressed, such as make the executive conference room a marketing and branding showcase for ABC Corporation. Show them another benefit of why they would want to do this. Okay? So we talked about background, we talked about objectives. Now we're going to talk about measures of success. We're still in the bullet point world. How do we know that we've been successful? How can we measure this? Again, we want to use client words wherever they're available for qualifiable outcomes. And then you also want to introduce the concept of quantifiable results. And many people will tell you, you can't measure the benefits, but in fact you can if you're creative and you think about it. So quantifiables. We've got functions and tools that you can list. Here's all the things you will now be able to do. And now what are the results of that? We're going to reduce or eliminate technology time. That's measurable. We can reduce or eliminate repair time. That's measurable. Users will want to use the room. That's qualifiable, but we can pull people and we can do follow-up to make sure that they're getting the user experience that they want. And matter of fact, we can make that part of your overall package of what you deliver. Meetings will become more efficient. You know, that's a feeling people have. It's qualifiable, but you can also measure it if you choose to. And the room will become a brand showcase for the buyer. Again, it's a qualifiable assessment, but if you choose to, you can measure those results. So give them some examples of how they're really going to benefit from all this. Now, the fourth section is about the value to the buyer. Okay? This is not price. We're not ready to talk about price yet. We're a long way from talking about price. This is return on investment. Okay? If we have customer source data, we want to use that. This is also an opportunity to introduce your expertise and demonstrate that your understanding of the implications of this project as it applies to this particular buyer. Because remember, you're being asked to quote on this, you're being asked to provide this proposal because you are good at something. This is a place to exercise some of that goodness. So here's some examples of expressing value in a proposal. For instance, we use customer data or anecdotes. They say, We don't get remote meeting participation. The people in the remote offices don't feel involved. Okay. If they did feel involved, we feel that their sales productivity will increase. As a salesperson, I'm going to lean forward and say, by how much? How much is your sales productivity inhibited by these meetings not working well, by the technology not helping the meeting proceed? You know, how much better of a salesperson am I going to be if I feel like I'm an active participant in the sales meetings, even though I'm halfway around the world? They'll give you a number, okay? Introduce that number. You don't have to tell them what that number is worth. They know what 10% productivity is worth, okay? Another example of value, improved communications reduces mistakes. Okay? Again, customer has data, they have anecdotes about this. These are, you can cite examples if you want to, but the fact is, make sure they know that you know that there's value in reducing mistakes through better communication. And then for this type of a project, meeting time is fantastic. Who wouldn't want to spend less time in meetings? I mean, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I want to spend more time in meetings today, right? And if you can say, and you can ask the client this in the discovery process, if these things happened, if all of these things worked the way you want it to, and this level of communication was increased as you've described, how much shorter would your meetings be? And how many meetings do you have a week? So how many hours is that really worth? And they may come to you and say, look, I personally, as the chief marketing officer, I could probably save 5 hours a week. And that's really valuable stuff. So examples of value are things that you've discovered in your discovery process. So a lot of bullet points. Now we're going to do something that's really familiar. Now you write the scope of work. And this is the sales scope of work. So a sales scope of work describes the project in customer terms, not engineering terms, not designer terms, not technical terms. There's another place for that in the addendum if you want to do that. We just need to describe the project in sales terms, just like you've done in the past. Okay? Be sure that you incorporate the customer experience into the scope. Okay? So it's not just about, what you're going to do, it's what is the outcome of having done those things. So if one of your outcomes, and I'm being a little bit glib here, but we've all had this conversation where, my client's biggest problem is they are so worried about the success of their event, they don't sleep at night. Okay, so you're going to put something in the scope of work that says, we're going to make sure that the client's able to comfortably leave the ballroom by 8 p.m. every night. Okay, that's part of your scope. So write the scope of work. It's the typical sales scope like you've always done. Address the customer experience. For instance, we're going to review proposed solutions with key users and stakeholders before commencing. So one of the part of the scope of your project, for instance, on this built project that we're examining here, is to go back to the customers again and review the solution with them and get more feedback and input. Okay. Review the final installation with stakeholders and key users. Okay. Part of that launching the project, part of making sure everything works or initializing it, make that part of the scope. Include an unexpected improvement in scope. Okay. They need a pleasant surprise. And oh, by the way, we're going to produce training videos that are going to be no longer than 3 minutes long, and you can put that on your internal site so that anybody using any meeting room can watch a tutorial about how to use all the technology in that room successfully. Okay, that's better than free training. Okay, that's evergreen training right there. Say, for instance, the client has issues with billing, so you're going to provide transparency in the billing process, and you might describe how that's going to work, because that is part of the customer experience. And then dates, finalization. We're going to complete all of the above by, pick the date. So, or the number of days after the project commences. Now, this is also going to connect to another section called mutual accountabilities that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But write your scope, be sure to include the customer experience. Within your scope of work are options. Okay, so the basic scope of work we've already described. Now you have 3 options. Okay? This is the most powerful part of this proposal tool. This is what makes this super special and super powerful for your customers, is it's not 3 substitutions or 3 upgrades. These are 3 different outcome levels, 3 different value points in customer terms. So you're going to create additional value for the customer to consider. All right. Now, what this does is provides a higher perceived value for the original offering. So if you show them an option A is we're going to do everything we talked about. Option B was we're going to do everything we talked about, and this thing you would like to have that you didn't think you could have because you didn't have the budget for it, but I'm going to make it attractive right here. Then option 3 is here's an even more powerful outcome that gives you even greater benefits, some of which you hadn't even thought about. They may not go for option 3, but it sure makes option 1 look a lot more valuable. The same company that is in position to give me option 3 is probably going to give me a great option 1. But it'll also make option 2 a lot more attractive. So we're going to give them 3 options. And here's how they work. I'm going to give you 2 different versions of this because I'm going to give you a live event one as well. So we're going to meet the original project criteria. That's option 1. The project scope by the stated deadline. Not a lot of embellishment here. Option 2, I'm going to give a secondary objective. If one of their concerns is training, ongoing support, the cost of repair, what happens when warranties wear out, I'm going to add some value by adding on a service contract. Now, honestly, 12 months is probably not enough. Nowadays, I would probably start at 18. I'm going to give them 6 months probably at the beginning as part of my original scope of work. So adding 12 months doesn't seem like a whole lot. Adding 18 months takes me to 2 years down the road. That has much higher perceived value, and honestly, it's not going to cost you any more money. And then the third option would be maybe add a 5-year system as a service agreement. This is a completely different paradigm. Instead of me selling you a system and then charging you for extended service and warranty, I'm just going to give you a working system for 5 years for a fee. Basically, you're going to lease the package from me and all the support that goes with it. Now, they may not have thought of that, but all of a sudden they're looking at an operating lease instead of a capital purchase. Somebody's going to sit up and take notice. Let me give you another option example. Let's say this is a live event. We're going to give the original scope of work, original project criteria, and that documentation recording. And I'm making quotey signs with my fingers right now. Air quotes, because the only time it's a documentation recording is when they paid for full production and they don't use it. And when they pay for documentation recording, they always want it to be a full production. So let's sell them what they actually want. Their secondary objective is they want to take the videos afterwards and do something with it. So option 2 is I'm going to add the editing, and I'm going to put intros and outros on there and branding. And I'm going to do all the stuff that help whatever their objective for that video is. Maybe it's to sell next year's event. Maybe it's something they're going to put on their website, YouTube page, or whatever that might be. Okay? I can help them with that. Okay? I can keep them from having to hire another supplier to do that because I can fold it into what I'm already doing. But the third objective is maybe they don't know what they're going to do with this stuff. Maybe they've always talked about using the videos afterwards. But what they really want is to get people signed up for next year. And what if maybe they can monetize the videos from this year's event? So why not propose something that does all of those things for you? I'm going to give you advanced production with custom graphics, and I'm going to develop a web portal for you for paid viewing so that you can extend the value of this event and monetize it for your organization. And I'm going to introduce this as, this is our highest value. Our best customers choose to do this. Okay? So that's how options work. Notice this isn't, option 1, 2-camera shoot. Option 2, 3-camera shoot. Option 3, 5-camera shoot. No, those are substitutions. What we're doing is increasing the overall value of the expense. So there's other types of options. I've just given you some examples here. Accelerating timeline. This happens a lot in the built environment. They get a quote from you and say, and you say, yeah, it'll take us 6 weeks to complete this project. The client says, well, we need it done by November 1, in which case you point out to them that they have to start by September 15th, which means they need to sign their contract by September 1. And then October 1, they come around and say, okay, we're ready to sign the project. We still want it done by November 1. Right? You can accelerate a timeline in options. So you would say option 1, we have 6 weeks from the time the contract is signed, or 9 weeks, or whatever the number is. Option 2, we do it in 5 weeks. Option 3 is we do it in 3 weeks. Okay? But there's a change in value in each one of those because time is a lot of value. So now if they decide to sign their contract late and they want to move the deadline, you've got an option here that covers it. So, well, great, then I guess you're taking option 3. You can add in things like design sessions, anything that makes the project more interactive. People love documentation packages. Integrators are still generating these things. Clients never actually look at them. So why not roll in that documentation package with unlimited training and make it part of another option? It's something that you don't have to have this, but if it's valuable to you, here it is. Financing is a great option. The integration as a service idea that I just presented there, this is not new. We started talking about this at Infocom networking events 10 years ago. So it is happening out there, but a lot of times we don't understand how to make money doing it, so we're very reluctant to present it to customers. Get better at financing, understand how financing works, because it's a great way to increase the value of your proposal to a customer. And anytime you can help the customer monetize something. I've got one of my clients is helping their client sell sponsorships because that was a pain point for the customer. They needed sponsors to help pay for some of the niceties they wanted to put on their event. And so my client's helping them do that, and then they're spending that money by making a better event. Everybody wins. So options could be very, very powerful for you. If you're struggling to figure out options, and there are some scenarios where it's very difficult to introduce options, particularly if the client is not forthcoming and is not allowing you to have a very deep discovery process, go back to your original package and unbundle it. All those value adds that you bundle in and take for granted that don't generate profit for the seller, take them out and separate them and make sure that there's something valuable embedded in them so that the client sees how that works, see why that is important. You integrate those things into the different levels of options for people. One of the things I used to do years and years ago was, if the client was putting us in a difficult venue and they didn't want to pay for drawings, I would say, well, here's the option. We can provide the drawings and the letter to the fire marshal to get approvals. And all of a sudden they started paying attention. Oh, the fire marshal, yes, the fire marshal needs to sign off on that. For that, we'll need a complete set of drawings, and here's what all of that costs. So all of a sudden we're getting paid for drawings that we used to do for free. And the fire marshal letter and all that stuff that we used to do for free, we're suddenly getting paid for as well. So unbundle the things that you've done, and that's where you can find value. Next section is the timeline. Now, we can create value and put timeline in the options, but we have to put the timeline of the project in here explicitly in the proposal. So you want to make sure that your timeline targets, your deadlines, your milestones are based on mutual cooperation. In other words, both parties have to do their part in order for the timeline to work. This is very important. One of the reasons we struggle with timelines is we give the client all the power, but then we have no leverage to enforce the timeline, and we have no recourse if the timeline isn't followed. Look for deadlines to move forward. That's an important concept. So once we've accomplished this, we reach this deadline, then we can move forward, reduce the number of things that happen in parallel, because it's another way that customers, I won't say they trick you, but they take advantage of the timeline by forcing you to do things at the same time that should be sequential. Make sure that all the payment and other business-related milestones, contracts, reviews, progress payments, all of that are identified in the timeline, and that make sure there's also a clause in there that says any alteration to the timeline is a change order. So if we deviate from what we've agreed upon in this proposal, okay, that's going to trigger a change order and a change order process. We'll talk more about change orders in a moment in terms and conditions, but before we get to terms and conditions, I put in mutual accountabilities. So we've done scope, we've done timeline, we've been very, methodical about presenting the project. We need to get back to something that's a little bit warmer and fuzzier. And mutual accountabilities, I have found to be one of the most useful ways to establish a peer-to-peer relationship with your buyer. It's that mutual responsibility that you have to each other in order for the project to succeed. So it has 3 sections in it. It's the things that you agree to do, things that the customer agrees to do, and what you jointly agree to do. And it looks like this. Your accountabilities, and these will tend to become boilerplate after a while. You won't have to invent these for every project, because you'll find that for types of projects, the same accountabilities almost always apply. So I always say things like, I will respond to your messages within 4 hours unless I've notified you in advance I won't be available, blah, 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 blah. In other words, establish your responsibility to be responsive. I will immediately notify you if I cannot comply with our agreed upon deadlines, okay? Which gives you permission to say, we're not going to make the deadline, because it's not always your fault you're not going to make the deadline. But you now have an accountability that says you have to let them know, which automatically is going to increase your communication. I and my team will demonstrate respect and cooperation when working in your space, and I will provide regular progress updates. You could probably do 5 or 6, no more than, I would never do more than 10 accountabilities here. Most of these will cover a lot of circumstances. But let's move on to the customer accountabilities. So to the customer, you will provide my team timely access to the workspace. You will make appropriate personnel available for scheduled project review, meetings, project commissioning, and training. And you will meet our agreed upon timeline for payments. So basically, you're just telling the customer that you've got to hold up your end of the bargain. Okay? You can't withhold the space from me and expect me to meet my timeline. If your people don't respond to me, if they're not responsive to the project needs, I can't meet my timeline. So you have to do your part too, Mr. or Miss Customer. And of course, it's always nice to say, hey, we agree that we would get paid on time. Now there's mutual accountabilities. Should conflicts arise, we agree to notify each other and work towards a resolution. That gives you permission to call the client that says, we need access to the space. Mary keeps scheduling meetings on top of it and keeps pushing us back. I am no longer going to be able to meet my deadlines. I need you to intervene. Oh, well, Mary's in charge of that space. Yes, I know she is, but this is a conflict. And my accountability is to let you know that we're not going to meet our objectives and there's going to be a change order if we don't. It's your responsibility to intervene so that Mary understands the implications and we can get back on the timeline. Okay. Hold each other accountable for meeting the project objectives. Well, we just did that in that conversation. And then we're going to protect each other's proprietary information on intellectual property. Now, honestly, yours is probably more at risk than theirs because they can take your proposal and shop it out and things like that. But at least we have a statement in here that doesn't require review by an attorney. This is just 2 people agreeing on how they're going to work together. Terms and conditions. All right, this is familiar territory. If your current terms and conditions is 2 pages of 6-point type, single-spaced, that's not what I'm talking about. There's a place for that. Well, it's the trash can, but you can put that in your addenda. We'll talk about that later. In your terms and conditions, this is a section of your proposal. You need to talk about your pricing and fees or by options. This is our first time that we talk about price. I list the 3 options. Option 1, I give it a name. This is let's call this the silver option. A 1-sentence description. It's everything we talked about in the pre-production meeting, blah, 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 whatever it might be. And here's the price. Option 2, in addition to the above, I'm going to include this, or in lieu of the above, we will do this instead. They can go back and look at the details back up in the scope of work section, but all I want to do is clarify what the price is so they can see the price difference between option 1 and option 2 on the same page, and then of course option 3. I want to introduce contract or agreement deadlines and a clause to explain how to change them. Okay? Don't put a deadline in, don't put in anything without some explanation of what to do if we need to change it. Everything is negotiable. Okay? Payment expectations, and introduce the idea that payments trigger progress, not progress triggers payments. Okay? We will do this work. When this work is complete, we expect this payment so that the work that follows can begin. So it's not payment for finishing work, it's payment for starting the next phase. Okay? And then detailed explanation of how to handle change orders. If you need a signature and a counter signature, then this is where you describe it. This is a term and condition of this proposal, which if signed, just became an agreement. And the last section is confirmation. In the confirmation section, you explain what the next steps are. Okay, the next steps, and hopefully by the time they've had a proposal, they've done all the due diligence. They're not seeing anything that they weren't expecting, at least in option 1. If they want to have a deeper discussion about option 2 or 3, that's part of next steps. Okay, if option 1 meets your needs, please sign and return. That will trigger this meeting. We will have this event. We will schedule this kickoff meeting, whatever it might be. The contract phase, you'll receive a contract, you'll receive an invoice, whatever those steps are. And then, of course, you need a signature page, a page that identifies the document, has the document date and number and titles on it, any reference numbers so that they can sign that page independently, but it still references your entire agreement. So next steps I typically put in, that's where I put in this quote is good until. It's probably in terms and conditions, but here's another great place to put it. Don't put a good until date unless you mean it. Okay? And you should mean it. You need a reason to rewrite your quote. If somebody gets back to you after the quote is expired, okay, you have every right to pull that quote back in and reconsider it before you continue. Next steps, a verified signature is required to initiate the project timeline. You know, sometimes on service contracts or service agreements, things where there's not product involved, I'll just let them make the payment, make the first payment, make the deposit payment, and we'll get started. Upon confirmation, we will schedule the project launch meeting at your location. Again, it's just telling them what's going to happen. It's very important to withhold services like this until you've got confirmation or affirmation that you're going to do the project. If you keep giving it away for free, there's no need for them to sign the contract. Now, there's the 9 sections. You've got some options in there because I know there's some marketing people on the call right now who are throwing up because all of their marketing collateral has been left out of this entire conversation. We have a place for addenda. Yes, you can put a little intro on the front page, but honestly, if they don't know who you are by the time they read your proposal, they're not going to read it. All right. Put that stuff in the back. If they want to dive in deeper, if there's other people on the committee who don't know who you are because they haven't been involved, make it available for them by all means. If you got concept drawings that this is based on, hopefully the client has already seen them. They've given you a nod to pursue a particular approach, so this will not be news for them. It's just reference. You might summarize your budget elements. All we gave them was option 1, 2, and 3 and some big numbers. We might want to break it down for them in the addendum. If you have any biographies or testimonials you feel you need to include because somehow the client hasn't seen them yet, this is a great place to put it. Background or discovery research results. If you did a discovery process where you interviewed clients, I might package that information up and give it back to them. You know, lots of anonymous quotes, maybe some statistics that you discovered. Great place for that to go as well. So there are the 9 sections of this. You don't have to use all of them to the extent that I just described. However, if it's a new project and a new customer, I strongly recommend that you use all of them to their fullest extent. So look at these as controls. You have 9 dials that you can, or slide faders you can put up or down depending on what the particular project and particular customer needs. So you could move those suckers around a little bit. So I see some questions coming up, and that's good. I'm just about ready to take questions. I have some final thoughts after questions, but I have a couple of things I want to talk to you about before we get to that. It'll only take a minute. So please keep typing in questions. Thank you, Mark. I see yours. You'll be up first. Next month's webinar. We talked about ideation last month. We talked about writing a service proposal this month. Next month, we're going to talk about pricing. We're going to talk about what your product or service is worth and how do you figure out what that is. So there's a relationship between your market value, your cost, and the demand of your product or your service. We need to have an honest discussion about that. We've neglected this. We've let too many traditions take over the way that we think about this. Let's get some of this sorted out. That's a great 3 webinar sequence there, so I hope you'll join me for that one. Jumpstart workshops. Hey, we've had 3 so far this year. We have another one in December. We have not launched yet. You'll hear about that in the months to come. But let you know, we're having a great time. We've had, I think, 180 different attendees this year. I think that's 50 plus different companies that have been involved. It's been a very, very successful event. I think our sponsors are happy. I think the attendees are happy. I'm pretty happy, which that's a pretty big deal, at least to me. We have management workshop in December. So December 4th and 5th in Dallas. You can keep track of this at trstimpson.com Jumpstart. But again, this is not launched yet, so there's not much more to do except mark your calendar, hold the date, start thinking about who needs to attend. This is owners, managers, top management, up-and-coming management. I have got some pre-sales from past attendees. Most folks are bringing 3, 4, or 5 people. So we have some management challenges in developing our team, and we're going to help address a lot of those things and get some basic management training and understanding of finance across this crowd. So mark your calendars. Looking forward to this. Make sure you're on the mailing list. If you personally signed up for this webinar, don't worry, you're now on the mailing list. That's the way it works. If you're sitting there and on somebody else's watch, you're sitting in the boardroom and you didn't personally sign up for this, and go to my website, click on the link for download your free ebook. I'll send you a free ebook and it'll register you for my newsletter. So you'll get a digital copy of Learning to Expect Better, and you'll get the Intentional Success Monday morning newsletter. That's all you have to do. While you're there, if you'd like to learn more about what I do, or if you just have some questions about this webinar or anything else, go to the contact page and schedule a free call. I love talking to folks. I don't offer this because I think it's going to be an inconvenience. I offer this because I want your questions. I want to chat with you. I'm not going to sell you anything if you have a question. So just give me a call. I'd love to talk to you, learn about what your challenges are. All right, so we're getting to the end here. So thanks once again to the workshop sponsors. And let's quickly try and answer some questions. All right, first question here. Mark asks, what dollar threshold did you use for this type of proposal? It would seem to be appropriate for a large event, but not smaller ones. All right, so Mark, there's no dollar threshold for this, but I would politely say you're probably not going to do this on a $1,000 order. I would do this on a $5,000 order in a heartbeat. That's really not my criteria. My criteria is, am I developing a customer or a client? If there's value to be extracted from this, this process works. And even on a small project, I've used this. I'll give you an example. Back in the day, when we started using 42-inch monitors for downstage monitors, they were still really expensive back then. And then we also had 42-inch monitors that we used for display, right? Customers would ask about, what's the face value of this? And we charged more for a display monitor than we did a downstage monitor. And customers dinged us on it. They go, wait a minute, you only charged me $250 for a downstage monitor, but one to go in my exhibit booth, you're charging me $600 for. Why is that? Well, it's a different outcome. Okay. The outcome on the stage is the client can see. It doesn't matter what the monitor looks like. It doesn't matter if the back is scratched. But when I put one in your exhibit booth, that's your brand. So we want to make sure you have a monitor that's fresh, clean, shiny, new, that reflects well upon you. That's the difference. Okay. So I apply the techniques even in a transactional phone call. So there's not a dollar threshold, but it's a great question. Try it out with some smaller clients. You'd be amazed if you can take a $5,000 customer and make them a $7,000 customer. That's a 40% improvement. Why not do that? Thanks. Eddie asks, identify the participant roles in developing this proposal: sales, project management, accounting. So going back to the ideation process, we want all of those folks involved. Well, maybe not accounting, but we definitely want sales. We want some technical representation of project management, somebody that represents how the field works, to examine all the background material and come up with the best ideas. Developing the proposal is ideally a sales function. Now, in some companies, your project managers are your salespeople. And in some companies, your salespeople are your project managers. So it becomes semantic. Hopefully you have salespeople who can read and write well and communicate well, because that's who should be writing your proposals. And on a big project, I'm going to involve ownership or sales managers or business development, somebody at a higher level, to make sure that we're putting the best foot forward for your organization. So thank you for that question. There's not an easy answer there, but it's whoever you need to make sure that you're putting the right proposal out in front of people. I have another question here that says, what about a repeat client? What about somebody that you've done business for as an annual event? So let's take the scenario of, say, you've got an association client, you do the event every single year. Even if all you've been doing is giving them product proposals for years. Here's all the equipment you use. Here's the breakout package times 27. Here's the things, the freebies we do for you. I've seen your association proposals. They're very transactional. You can convert to this proposal, and I would spend just as much time as I would on a new client for the background. All of our recurring events have background. They have challenges they want to overcome from last year. They have improvements they want to gain. They've moved into a new venue, so it creates situational issues. Background and situation are still very important. Goals and objectives, they may be the same from year to year, or there may be one that changes. And particularly if there was a new objective for that year, I would certainly cite that. Measures of success, I might downplay a little bit, particularly if you have a long-term relationship. Value to the company, I would probably downplay that. I'm going to pull that lever down a little bit. Scope of work and options, very applicable. Okay. How many of you have said, God, I'm trying to get the client to upgrade the cameras. I'm thinking of a specific one of my customers right now who still had some old Sony D30 cameras on their inventory, and the same client had used them for 10 years, and they loved the price and they didn't care that they looked like crap, right? So they were having trouble getting the client out of that mode because it was a transaction. And every time they tried to substitute them, the client goes, well, I can't pay for those new fancy cameras. Just give me the ones I've always been happy with. So optioning proposals allows you to unbundle a lot of things and put them into the options. And in the process of doing that, option one did not include the old cameras. As a matter of fact, the old cameras disappeared completely. So you can use all of those. Timelines still apply. Mutual accountability still apply. Very often it's stuff that you've already agreed on, but you might address issues that you've had in the recent past. Terms and conditions, again, it still applies even though it's a long-time customer. And confirmation or next steps. If it's a long-time customer, I would introduce another benefit in the next step, something that you haven't done before that might help their event. This is your value add, for instance. Maybe a fresh design or a design meeting or something. Maybe a discovery session or an ideation session with the client to help come up with more creative ideas, maybe a new look or feel. to improve their event, make a better attendee experience. Okay. All right, one more question here. Ken asks, can you speak more to an itemized budget with line items and dollars to a budget of buckets? Seems to be a big topic for us, what the client wants. Some feel itemized as a value to our clients. All right. Ken, I feel your pain. Some feel itemized as a value to our clients is very often salespeople who want the proposal to do their work for them. So itemization, again, that's addenda stuff. I can put a list of equipment in an addenda, but I don't want to sell with it. So if you're having trouble converting clients from looking at itemized proposals into looking at buckets, as you say, which is a great word, of budgets. Here's the budget for the audio, here's the budget for the video, here's the budget for the lighting. Make the buckets a little bit narrower, a little bit smaller. Say, here's the budget for the lighting equipment and labor. Here's the budget for the lighting design and operation. Here's the bucket for the lighting deliverables or expendables. You know, that sort of thing. And make it 3 buckets instead of 1. And that might help you get a little bit closer. I hope that begins to address your issue, but I think what you have is a sales mindset issue, in which case you are welcome to borrow my big stick with nails in it. All right, and okay, one more question. Do you find you sell more option 1 because you show them options 2 and 3? Yeah, there's a little bit of that tendency. What's important, and thank you for asking that question, because you need to be agnostic about which option they take. All 3 options should be valuable to you, otherwise do not propose them. And I really want the client to pick the choice that's best for them. So whether it's option 1, option 2, or option 3, you will be surprised how many people will pick option 3 if you develop it well. So don't be afraid to put it out there. But yes, option 3 will make option 2 look better. Okay, so option 3 is like, wow, here's everything I could have, but you know, this is pretty nice. Option 2 has heated seats. Option 3 has air-conditioned seats, but you know, if I had heated seats, I'd be happy. So that's exactly how it's supposed to work. There are contrasts that makes it easier. You know, the other example I use is the old Walmart DVD example. You know, back when DVD players were hot, if you walked into Walmart, there was only 3 models. There was the model for $49 that you wanted, that they were always out of stock of, or when you got there, it really looked cheap and it was a company you'd never heard of. Option 2 was that value option, you know, name brand, all the features you want, but again, they're out of stock. And then option 3 was that $350, $400 item that you ended up buying because you didn't want to buy option 1. So there's different ways that you can apply those options. But again, another great question. All right, some final thoughts here, and I can send you on your way. So just think about, you may not follow this exactly, but just think about using the concept of a proposal a little bit more creatively. Okay? Don't do what you've always done, because you'll get what you've always got, right? There's potential value you need to uncover for your customer, and often you'll find that there's additional margin for you. Some of the high margin things that you're giving away, you could sell if you just unbundled it, separated it out into an option, and made the value more apparent to the customer. You know, group it with other things that add value in the same way so that they can upgrade the fit and finish of their project. This will also help you better define success, and it'll increase customer satisfaction, because they'll understand the choices that they made, the fit and finish that they bought, and when they're actually dealing with a change order. Okay? And you've got to practice this. Okay? Start with some low-risk opportunities, refine your technique, get better at this, and you'll find it's a very, very powerful tool for you. So thank you all very, very much for participating today. You'll get an email tomorrow that tells you how to access the archive of this so you can share it with your friends. Or honestly, you just might want to watch it again because you love hearing my voice so much. So thank you guys so much, and don't forget to register for next month's webinar.